had to go about it, write it out and find it myself.
This is The Final Word, story time with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins. It's not happening during a test match, so that means we can do the full scope of the show. We can get back to some numbers we may not have got right in previous weeks. We can look at new numbers as well. We will use those numbers as a vehicle to drive you through the motorways of cricket history. I haven't thought this metaphor through, but something like that. Maybe off the motorways, maybe into the byways, the back lanes, the meandering little country roads with a stone wall along one side, and when someone else drives along coming the other way, one of you has to reverse for 6 miles because there's nowhere to pull over. That's where we're going to go today on Storytime, because that's what we do. Hello, Adam.
Nicely set up, Jeff. Yes, I'm rocking back. Often I record the podcast positioned forward, as you would know if you watch the YouTube clips, but we're not filming this, so I'm lounging back. I'm planning to take that kind of attitude to this podcast, nice and easy. And we got a few messages last week saying, short edition of Storytime, that it wasn't quite long enough for their Saturday morning walks, for example. So I expect this will be. We've got some revisits later on, quite a few new numbers, and yes, looking forward to stretching out a wee bit.
Well, people have been able to tell us about that on the Discord page. Discord is like an old-fashioned chat room, but brought into the modern era where anyone who's on the Final Word Patreon account can jump in the Discord and have a chat to each other and to us. It's been really nice. We drop in there and people are talking away amongst themselves. It's like when you have a party and you're a little bit anxious about whether your friends from different friendship groups will get along, and then you find out that they do, and you go, oh, this is good. I can now pop down to the shops and get something without worrying about it.
It's the perfect comparison. I felt that way a little bit. I'm like, when we started the Discord, as keen as I was for it, I'm like, maybe we will have to not moderate the conversation, but kind of engage with every topic. But we don't, because everyone's quite happy and content over there, about 150 people. And we're, as I said, I think on the weekly show, it's an egalitarian structure. We are but two members, nothing special about, apart from formally being the moderators, which I don't expect we'll ever need to use those moderating powers, because people are fairly civilised on there. People just crack on and talk about the game and various other bits and pieces, organising meetups and talking about, when we go to the Olympics in 2028 and what else, talking about television shows and music they're engaging with and all the rest. So happy just to be part of that conversation and contributing when we can.
The only moderating I've done is setting up different conversational threads for people, different channels, topic channels when they ask for them, because being something of a control freak, I decided we should reserve that power for ourselves so we didn't end up with like 900 channels in a very short space of time. So basically people just say, can you make a channel where we can talk about Bannerman? And I say, yes, I can. And they say, can you make a channel where we can talk about whose birthday it is so they can get a message from Sachin? And I say, yes, I can. That's how it works. It's a very permissive structure. Yet another reason why I should not and will not have children, because they'd be like, yeah, whatevs, do what you want. Yeah, sure.
And yet another reason why you should join Patreon as well, which is kind of what this is all about with Nerd Pledge. But that's the ticket to the Discord page. Discord channel rather. Once you're a patron, you get the link, or you get added to your Patreon page, the ability to join Discord, and away we go.
Yeah, and maybe you get a slab of Brick Lane as well into the bargain. Who knows? The rewards are endless. They're not endless. There's like there's like probably 3 things, but they're good things. The vaccine game, is this happening?
Yep, it's gathering pace. I was at Felix's book launch last night over at Rough Trade East in Brick Lane, or on Brick Lane, and there were a number of Oval Dream Boys there, including the Brick Lane, absolutely, Brick Lane Brewing. I nearly called them the Brick Lane Brewing Corporation, not the Brick Lane Brewing Corporation, Brick Lane Brewing Community. This is the Brick Lane in London, though, not the Brick Lane they're referring to in Melbourne.
Not the one in Dandenong.
No, that's right. So, no, but I think there's a consensus we've arrived at that it will be the 17th of September. It will be somewhere in the southeast of London. After we finish recording today, I'm going to make a couple of phone calls and try and sort out where we're doing it, and then we'll crack on. How we reduce this to 22 players, so 11 for the Dream Boys and 11 for us, that I haven't quite worked out yet. But talking to someone last night, we can supply scorers and umpires and cocktail makers and the live stream. We've talked through a little bit. That shouldn't be too difficult to achieve. So we might have commentators and camera operators, and there'll be loads of roles on the day. And then we'll have a couple of beers afterwards, and it'll be lovely.
Have you considered doing a sort of South Africa style three-way cricket, 3-team cricket? Can you make that happen?
I suppose we could. The only challenge there might be that on a Friday afternoon in mid to late September, we won't quite be blessed with the light that we might have been in June, July. So if we start at 4:30, we'll probably only have enough time for a T20.
Bring a pink ball down. You're the pioneer of this. Bring a pink ball down.
We would need floodlights.
Pop the floods on.
Yeah, the floodlights, if they I doubt floodlights exist at the types of grounds we're talking about in our conversations. But, it's all part of it. We'll see where we land. But, yes, pencil into your diary. We've got to find a process, though, Jeff. The one issue we might have, and that'll come down to a bit of captain's call stuff, we're going to have to work out who is playing. I had a lovely young man called Tom come up to me last night and insisted he would play as a member of the AstraZeneca quota. I'm like, that's fine, you can play. The issue being I've said yes to everybody who wants to play so far, and that is more than 11 people, I assure you. So we have some stuff to work through. Maybe we'll ballot it or something like that, but everybody will be welcome.
Thus, for the first time, you understand the pain of a cricket selector. You've got more than 11 good candidates, and you've got to maybe certain people can be the same player for the purposes of the exercise. Like 3 different people can share one player's name, and like one of them can bat for that player and one of them can bowl for that player, that sort of thing.
That's what they should have done. Yeah, that's what they should have done with Clem Hill. That would have given him incentive enough to not throw Selector McAllister out the window. Yeah. Or attempt to.
Yeah. I mean, look, as whomst amongst us has not wanted to throw as chairman of selectors out a window at one point in our lives. So everybody will be there. Will Winnie be there? Will she be able to meet her adoring fans?
Not only will she be there, she will be there in a walking capacity. I know I flagged this a couple of weeks ago, but it has happened. And it's kind of related, I suppose, to the game where we've been discussing.
She must be an English baby, because Australians don't walk, mate.
Yes, Australians don't fucking walk. Umpire's got a job to do. Winnie walked. And not only did she walk, she made a real statement. She decided to walk for the first time, her first unassisted step, as I think they call it in the jargon, at Phil's wedding the other day that we were doing our thing from. Between the formalities and the reception, we were having a couple of beers, and it was Felix who inspired it as well. I put up some photos on Instagram and Facebook before, but you can very clearly see her left foot in one frame and then in the next, and she's taken the one step, and Felix's reaction is priceless, with mouth agape and couldn't believe what he was seeing. And it was very special, actually. So, she can now lift herself up on her own without any assistance, a bit like a clean and jerk movement for a weightlifter. Like she starts bent over and you don't know whether she's going to quite get the bar above her head, but now she can consistently do that. Yeah, and isn't galloping or anything, but she can take at least one step. So by September 17, more than a month from now, I reckon she'll be very much up and about. So yes, she will be there in Dulwich, I assure you.
Okay, she may be able to get through the 22 yards, maybe. Speed between the wickets might be a problem, but
she might be my runner.
Determination to get down the other end. All right, let's get into the thing that we do. Let's start off with a game that we like to call Nerd Pledge. Nerd Pledge. It's the reverse quiz. It's a game that we play with people on our Patreon page, this miraculous setup where we make a show twice a week, and they're the reason we're able to make it. They make it possible by sending us contributions, and the contributions are financial in nature, and they're an amount of currency that helps fund the show. But they're not a normal amount of currency. They're an amount with a very specific numerical value, a numerical value that to the person who sends it means something about cricket, but we have to work out what that meaning is. E.g., the first of them, Jeremy Bourke, first cab off the rank, always a keen pledger, J. Bourke, with the number $5.88. 588 means something about cricket.
And there's always a clue when J. Bourke is involved as well. It reads as follows this time. This player may have just appeared in your lifetimes, gentlemen. And while he had a test career, it's more appropriate to say that he only had about 1/60th of a test career, thanks to those being captained by his opposition namesake, not showing much mercy. So Jeremy has sent through cryptic clues before. This is broadly in that theme. Thus, it's one for you to take, Jeff, because I would have had no idea.
Okay, so a player who played against a team whose captain had the same name. I don't know if this was first name or last name or some mix of the two, and who ended up having 1/60th of a test career. So, and the fact that he said may have just appeared in our lifetimes, I'm taking that to mean that Jeremy's guessing sort of 80s. This is probably maybe the first half of the 80s. It could even be the very late 70s if Jeremy were overestimating our ages. Somewhere in there, there's a player who came up against a captain with the same name. So I was trying to work this out in terms of Australian players and who was captain in the era. Derek Murray captained the West Indies for one test, and Murray Bennett played for Australia, but they didn't play against each other. Bob Willis and Bob Massey never played against each other. John Wright captained New Zealand, but he never played against Kevin Wright of Australia or John Maguire of Australia. Incidentally, Adam, you might be interested in this. John Maguire in 1983 was the last John to play for a test for Australia until John Hastings in 2012. They didn't have a John for 30 years. Isn't that extraordinary?
And that would have been, without doubt, the most common name in Australia through that stretch. I'm sure it would have been.
Absolutely. It always is. It probably still is. I mean, John's left, right and centre, and even more so if you count the Jonathans and so on. No Johns. Not a John in that 29 years. Jeff Howarth captained New Zealand but never played Jeff Dimmock, who played for Australia. Jeff Dimmock, Jeff Lawson, Jeff Marshall had decent careers. They're the G Jeffs. If we go to the J Jeffs, Jeff Crow, New Zealand captain, never played Jeff Moss, who only played one test. And I thought maybe Jeff Moss might be my guy because 1/60th of a career means it's probably only one test that this player played. He played it against Pakistan in 79. He did make 60 runs in that match, so that 1/60th of a test career, I thought, across two innings, in one test he made his 60th run, 1/60th, and he averaged 60, obviously, because he only played one test. But they won that. Australia won that test. So it wasn't anything to do with a team not showing mercy. And the only way I could try to link this to Jeff Crow was that Pakistan were captained by Javed Miandad, and Jeff Crow played New Zealand first-class cricket, as did his father, Dave Crow. So me and Dad played first-class cricket in New Zealand.
Very 12-man areas from you there, Jeff.
Yeah. But at this point I thought, okay, I've got to widen my scope. It's not going to be an Australian player because nothing adds up. And I was the main captain of the era. I'm thinking Clive Lloyd is he's the quintessential captain of the era. I thought, is there any link with David Lloyd? But they never played against each other. But Clive Lloyd did play a test against a guy called Andy Lloyd, who played for Warwickshire, who I don't know if you would have come across Andy Lloyd in your England travels, but he was a tall left-hand opener. In 1984, he played 3 ODIs against the West Indies, did okay, made a couple of 30s and 40s, and got picked to open in the first test of that series at his home ground at Edgbaston. And he's up against Joel Garner, Malcolm Marshall, Michael Holding, and Aldine Baptiste. Oh, such good names that come out of the Caribbean. And he's out there batting, and England lose a couple of wickets quickly, but Andy Lloyd's going along okay. He's 10 not out, half an hour in, and then smack, he gets hit in the temple by Malcolm Marshall, in the right temple, realises he can't see properly when he gets up, retires hurt on the spot. His sight in his right eye was permanently damaged and he never played for England. Again, he couldn't see the ball properly. He did see it well enough to come back and play county cricket, and so he became a significant figure at Warwickshire because he ended up captaining that side, played until 1992, played for them across most of his 312 first-class games, and became an administrator there through the 90s when they were bringing in Brian Lara in the 500 year and all the rest of it. Andy Lloyd was a prominent figure there, but he's test-wise still remembered for this one brief innings because he didn't bat in the second innings. He was too injured to do so. So he likes to trade on the fact that he's the only opener in Test cricket who was never dismissed across his entire career because he got taken out half an hour in. And having made 10 runs from 17 balls faced in that innings, that is a career strike rate of 58.8. 588 was the number from Jeremy Bourke. Your number is Andy Lloyd.
Outstanding. Well done. I should say, well done, Jeremy Bourke, for linking nicely through to another podcast that's been made at the moment by Brian Murgatroyd, friend and I was going to say colleague of ours, but he's usually been on the media manager side in the time that you and I have been working in the show. I suppose he's been a broadcaster at different points in that stretch as well, but most of the time Murga's acts as either the Australian or more recently the English team media manager. Of course, he had that job at the ICC as well some years ago. He's released a podcast called
One Test Wonders.
One Test Wonders, that's it, One Test Wonders, where he's going to talk to every England player who's alive who played one test match. And as we know from our Storytime program, there are a lot of those.
There are lots.
If there's not already, there will be an Andy Lloyd episode at some stage.
And I mean, Murgus, all I would like Brian and Murgatroyd to do beyond that is try to talk to the dead ones as well. If you can summon them, there would be some interesting tales to be told, I imagine. So that's the 588 for Jeremy Bourke. I'm very confident with that, and I've never been confident that I've solved a J Bourke one first go, but I'm feeling pretty pleased with that one.
Yeah, I think that's a miracle. I thought when I saw that clue and when we first started going through it together yesterday, I thought there's no way we're getting this right. This is going to the audience and they will have a crack and maybe we get it on week 2 or week 3 and Jeremy will send something even more obscure next time and so the pattern will continue. But the fact that you've gotten there so ruthlessly is a lovely way for us to start the show. May we continue the way we started.
May the road rise to meet you, as they say in Ireland. The only thing I don't know is exactly what 1/60th of a Test career refers to, because is it about batting for half an hour, or what's 60 times half an hour? That's 30 hours. Is 30 hours a Test career? Is 60 tests a Test career? I'm not quite sure. Is it? Did he only play 1/60th of the Test match? Is that like how many hours?
Yeah,
like
okay,
40,
so half an hour. No, a Test match is 30 hours, isn't it? No, hang on, that can't be right. A Test match,
it's more like 40.
No, 6 times 5. 6 times 5 is 30. So a Test match is 30 hours. So
not counting the breaks, and if there's no extra time, it would be 1/60th of
1/60th of a Test match. There you go.
Okay,
there it is.
All
We
right.
worked it
We've
out.
Solved it all. Absolutely beautiful. I love it when things come together like this. Our second number of the day comes in from Vijay. It is 207 in euros. Ooh la la. 207 euro cents. And so, as you can tell in Nerdpledge, this could mean 20.7, it could mean 2.07, it could mean 207 million. It's 207, and the clue from VJ says, the game was not about winning or losing anymore, but was a story of courage over skill. What have you got, Adam?
Okay, VJ. Well, first of all, I went through all the 207s in Test cricket, and invariably they've been in a winning side, which stands to reason. If you make a double ton, more often than not, your team's won. So NASA's 207 at Edgbaston in 1997, which we talked to him about in great depth last year. Ponting's 207 against Pakistan at Sydney in early 05, which of course was Watto's debut. Even Mike Gadding at Chennai in 1985 on that tour, England won that Test match by 9 wickets. I went back and had a look at Keith Stackpole's 207 that we've discussed before on the show to start the 1970-71 Ashes, when he should have been run out for 20 or something like that, and there was a photograph in the paper the next day, but he got away with it. It was a heavy scoring draw. Marvin Adepaddu made 207 against Pakistan at Kandy in 2000 in a rain-destroyed draw. It was the only innings of the match. I kind of thought maybe I could stretch it to that, but it doesn't quite tick the box. But what we're really looking for is a fourth innings, aren't we? It would stand to reason. Courage over skill. We're looking for something that's happened deep into a Test match. So
someone who's being beaten up by fast bowlers is what I was thinking with this.
Yeah, me too. So Hanuma Vihari obviously tore his hamstring at Sydney this year. And I thought, look, let's start there. Let's see what we can find out about that innings. And he was out there for, unfortunately, 237 minutes. But I thought, hang on, when did he tear his hamstring? He tore his hamstring after facing, it depends how you read the commentary, but in about his, it's very difficult to interpret when exactly it happened from what I looked at. But I think it's within the realms of possibility that he tore his hamstring half an hour into his innings. Hard to measure without having access to a full replay, but that's a bit of a stretch, but that could be it. Alternatively, because of course Vihari batted for all those hours to save that Test match alongside Ravichandran and Ashwin, but that wouldn't have been possible if not for the work of Cheteshwar Pujara earlier on that day and on day 4 as well, then into day 5. I went through it and lamentably he only faced 205 balls at Sydney, not 207. However, he also faced 2 wides in the innings, which takes him to handily 207 times Pujara readied himself to face up against the Australian bowlers in that 4th innings. So yes, it's a bit spurious a link, but I think we've had clues a little bit like this from VJ before, where it's required a bit of a pivot. And 205 legal deliveries plus the 2 wides that would have been re-bowled equals 207. What do you reckon?
I like it. I like the creativity because he did. I've always thought that's an anomaly with the wides where a no ball will be counted as a ball faced, even though it's not counted as a ball bowled. So you have this thing where it doesn't stack up, where a bowler, they've got to bowl that delivery twice. So over 21.4 or whatever happens twice in a row. And it's counted in the deliveries faced by the batter. But a wide is not counted in the deliveries faced by a batter, even though they could have theoretically scored off the wide.
I think it's fine because if you think about it, a no ball by definition is still a ball you can score off. A wide by definition is a ball that you shouldn't. I mean, the whole idea of a wide is that it's out of reach of the batter. So thus, I think that it's perfectly reasonable for the wides not to count, but the no balls to count. I suppose where that might fall down with no balls is where it's a head high full toss, and thus you'd be at risk if you tried to play it. But more often than not, when you're thinking about no balls, you're thinking about the front foot historically anyway, when this would have been drafted. So I get the inherent logic to it.
If you bowl one that slips out of the hand that goes 2 metres over the batter's head on the full, that's a no ball, not a wide. So that's a no ball they can't reach.
Yeah, so it depends, doesn't it? So there's a bit of grey area here. That is a tough one. Basically, it's a no ball when it doesn't hit the cut strip. Not a wide.
Yeah.
So and it's also that is a quirky no ball where in this scenario you would be credited with a ball faced if the ball missed the cut strip. If it lands just on the surface and is 4 feet outside the off stump and lands at second slip,
outside the tram tracks,
and it ends up at second slip, Steve Harmison style, that's a wide, not a no ball. So I'm not saying it's without its flaws. But I kind of get where it's going. And put it this way, mate, it answers my question for Vijay. So
it does.
I like how it works.
I like it. I like that in this instance. Of course, Vijay, if that's not the right answer, you can just send us a DM on Patreon. You can give us another clue. You can nudge us closer to the truth, and we'll come back to it on a subsequent show. Our next number comes up from an old friend of the show, Angadh Oberoi, who did some fine work with us on White Line Wireless back in the day.
He certainly did.
I
have great memories of commentating with Angadh through the 2016 World T20. He was a very dependable White Line Wireless colleague in your front room there, Jeff, when you were in India, and I was pretty much camping in your house for 3 weeks. Weird as it is to say, that they're some of the finest memories I have of working in broadcasting.
It was a pretty entertaining time, and Angadh's also joined your club pretty recently. He had a baby boy a few months ago, so he's loving that part of life at the moment and listening into the show, and has sent in this nerd pledge, which is $5.30. $5.30. Now, Angadh was one of the organisers behind the Swami Army, so he's mad about Indian cricket, but loves Australian cricket as well. Lives in Australia and is passionate about all of the cricket that goes on. And I think he'd be a few years younger than us, so I think he'd be about the right age to have been a kid old enough to have been very impressionable at the time that this happened.
Right.
So I think with 5.30, I think he's going with the 5 for 30 that Damien Fleming took against India at the Adelaide Oval. Oh, sorry, at Adelaide Oval. I don't want to put the in front of it. I'll get an angry email from Andrew Faulkner.
Rightly so.
Rightly so. At Adelaide Oval in 1999. And that, of course, was the innings in which the hat-trick that wasn't took place. The catch that was dropped from the potential third wicket in 3 balls by Shane Warne at first slip. The drop catch wouldn't have been a huge problem in the match. Australia had set India 396 in the 4th innings and had them 5 down for 93. So, they were going okay. Going back and rewatching it, he gets Sourav Ganguly's the first one in the hat-trick, a pretty decent first wicket, off the glove with a bouncer. And it just surprised Sourav a bit. I don't think he was expecting the bouncer from Flem. It was a bit sharper than he thought might come through. And he gloved it down the leg side, and Adam Gilchrist took a great catch, dived away one-handed and managed to snare it really high above his head down the leg side. And then Ajit Agarkar comes out and gets a nice wide ball and drives it straight to Steve Waugh at gully. So that's the second to fall. And Javagal Srinath, you're a pretty decent chance of a hat-trick if Javagal Srinath is facing it, okay with the bat, but didn't do great things with it. And he gets sort of back of a length, tries to force it through the offside, gets a thick edge, it goes fast at head height to Shane Warne, who parries it away. It's interesting watching the inevitable Robert Linda footage of this, because it's one of the few times in Shane Warne's career that he genuinely looks chastened, like he looks really upset. Normally he brushes things off, but he's down on his haunches and he pulls his hat over his face and sort of holds his head in his hands like he can't believe that this has happened. His close friend Damien Fleming in the Victorian team, and he's dropped the hat-trick, what would have been Fleming's second hat-trick, a very rare feat in Test cricket. And there's also Fleming's response where you can very clearly see his mouth moving. You can clearly see him say, "Fuck!" on the coverage. But what also stood out was by the end of the over, Gilchrist is patting Fleming on the back, and Fleming's already laughing. He's already smiling about it, and there's sort of a bit of Damien Fleming's character shone through there, that he's, he wasn't going to hang on to that for too long. He knocks off Srinath 2 overs later, gets Anil Kumble to follow. He'd already got Lakshman for a golden duck earlier in the innings, so he was bowling all right that day. And a good haul finishes up with 5 for 30.
We spent sort of like quite a bit of our interview with Flem for the Final Frontier podcast, talking about the 99-2000 series against India, going through that hat-trick that wasn't in some detail. And everything you said there tallies with him. From Warne actually feeling kind of quite a lot about it. Because remember, at the time, there was this run of Victorians taking hat-tricks. There was Merv, then there was Flem, then there was Warney, and then there was nearly Flem again, and that kind of broke that run. But yeah, the fact that Warne and Fleming had played together in both the test in Pakistan and the test in Melbourne. I remember Fleming was standing at mid-off when Warne was bowling his hat-trick delivery, and went up to him, and I don't remember what the piece of advice was. It was probably something along the lines of bowl your stock delivery, which is what people always say about hat-trick balls, but instead Warne bowled a top spinner and caught the shoulder of the bat, and David Boone did the rest. But yeah, there is that scene. And Flem, it was his golden summer, wasn't it? He talked about his goal at the start of the summer, which he said to the team was to sing the song 6 times. And they did sing the song 6 times, beating Pakistan 3-0, then doing likewise to India. And this is right in the middle of that. It was probably when Flem came back to the team. He'd missed he played a little bit in the Ashes of 98-99, but he was very much at the peak of his fitness here. A shorter run-up, bowling more quickly, and he was brilliant. I think this is the summer that he looks back on with most fondness.
Yeah, and it's also notable because that Agarkar dismissal is the first of the Ajit Agarkar ducks. Now, I know we've talked about this on the show before, but it's always worth going through again because in the first innings of that test, he batted well. He made 19 off 69 balls, batted for an hour and a half, batted for 3 times as long as Andy Lloyd's test career, Ajit Agarkar, in the first innings of this match. And then he gets out in the hat-trick, or the non-hat-trick, the second wicket to fall, golden duck in the second innings. Golden duck in Melbourne, golden duck in the second innings in Melbourne. So king pair to follow.
That was Mark Waugh's doing, wasn't it? The second duck at Melbourne, when they brought Mark Waugh to clean up the tail, and Agarkar had a brain explosion. And that's when, as you say, the momentum really builds, doesn't it? Everybody in Australia is watching Agarkar as he walks out to bat, kind of thing. Yeah.
So 4th innings in this stretch, comes out in Sydney to face up. First innings there, golden duck. So that's 4 in a row, 4 balls, 4 dismissals. Second innings in Sydney, survives his first ball, cheers, pandemonium, gets out second ball. And then he plays a couple of matches in India and Bangladesh where he makes some runs after this. But when Australia come back, the next time he faces Australia in Mumbai, 0 off 12 balls, 0 off 15 balls. So that's the 7 ducks in a row against Australia. His next few innings against all comers, 6, 0, 1, 2, 109 not out at Lord's. so he broke the streak in pretty good form. And by this point, it was 2002. And the next time he came back to Australia in 2003, across the whole series, he made 11, 0 not out, 0, 1 and 2. What a time.
Fantastic. I didn't realise that after the 7 ducks, he had 4 more scores in single digits, another duck, and then made the 109 not out. I didn't realise it was such a breaking down of the damn wall kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, as they say, he has got his name on the honours board at Lords and does have the quickest half century, or did have the quickest half century for India in one-day cricket, 21 bowler. So,
yep.
Yes, well, there it is. Ajit Agarkar, 5 for 30. Angadh Oberoi. Let us know whether we've got that right. Next up is 641. It's in dollars. It's from James Roder. And you know what I did, Jeff? I went straight back to Adelaide Oval 4 years later, and I thought about exactly the same cricketer. How's that?
I was so hoping this would happen. So as I've said before in the final word, we don't cook the books, right? We do the numbers in the order they come in. So if there's a nice convenient pairing, I don't put them together. It's the way they come out of the list.
It's the way it's come out of the womb. The final word womb is that we've had 530, which is the Flam, which leads us into Agarkar, into 641, 4 years later. What a test match. And I just thought it was worth sort of initially pacing through a bit more of this backstory. So Mumbai test match that you referred to before, where he made those 2 painful ducks to finish the streak. He's actually left out of the Indian team for Calcutta and Madras. So he's not there for the 2 sort of stunning wins. So he's part of the 2001 triumph, but peripherally. That might be why when I texted him a number of times last year to appear on Final Frontier, and he never replied to any of them. Thanks for that, buddy. But I think by then, from an Australian perspective, we thought, this guy's a bit of a joker, right? And not because of his bowling, but because of his batting. It became a punchline. And you think back on it now, you got to feel for the guy, because as soon as he arrives on the scene, because he can bat, notwithstanding all these ducks, he comes in as a guy who genuinely can bat from first-class cricket. There are all these comparisons to Kapil Dev. He's made that 21-ball 50. There are these expectations on his shoulders which he can never quite meet. Until that famous day in Adelaide in 2003, 2004. So until that point, he'd never taken more than 6 wickets in a test match. He'd been going around for 4 years. And they were the 6 he took at the MCG in that 1999 test match. 4 in the first innings, 2 in the second, I think it was. He took 4 in the first test at Brisbane. So he had a bit of wind in the sails to start the 03-04 series in a rain-affected draw. He arrived at Adelaide basically with the new ball. So he was first change at Brisbane, but for Adelaide he was made sort of the attack leader. And he's in his 18th test match, but he's averaging 46. And he's up against, that Australian team in a test where they made 550 bloody six in the first innings, Ponting adding 242 of those. I mean, sure, India fight back amazingly well, make 523 themselves, the Rahul Dravid 233 that we've talked about at length, and there with Lakshman again with his 148. But nevertheless, Australia are ahead in the test match. We've all seen this one before, haven't we? They come out in the second innings, they make 250 or something like that in no time at all. They declare with enough time to bowl them out on the final day. That's just kind of what Australia did for year after year under the captaincy of Steve Waugh.
Yeah, or at worst, they might have run out of time to beat India, but they were going to comfortably draw the test match.
That's it. Australian teams did not collapse at home. They certainly didn't collapse on a road at Adelaide. But it's this great bit of commentary. I went back and watched the highlights of this, where Shane Warne is saying on television as the players walk out and Agarkar takes the ball, as I say, average of 46 at this stage. He says something like, what Agarkar can do is shape the ball back really well to left-handers, and lo and behold, that's exactly what he does to Justin Langer and gets him out leg before wicket for 10. And then he goes bang.
Who said that on the commentary?
Shane Warne, because Warne was out of the team at the time.
When he was
serving
suspended.
his drugs ban. So Warne picked up his drugs ban in early 03, and Channel 9 signed him almost immediately to work on those top-end test matches and through the summer of 03-04. So then, but he goes bang, bang. So Ricky Ponting, the captain, 242 in the first innings, 0 in the second, taken brilliantly in the gully by Akash Chopra, who's been an occasional colleague of ours on radio the last few years. He didn't play loads of Test cricket, but he was influential here, catching Ponting in the gully. Then Sachin gets involved and takes a couple of wickets and rips out Australia's middle order of Damien Martin and Steve Waugh. And late in the day... Happy birthday indeed. And just as the sort of shadows lengthen at Adelaide Oval, they bring Agarkar back into the attack, and he bowls this extraordinary spell. The first of 4 wickets was Andy Bickle, a leg cutter to die for, hitting the leg stump, and a piece of Bill Lawry gold as well. He's like, woohoo! There she goes! It's all happening! Bill just loses his mind when Bickle's dismissed in this way. Simon Kadich is probably the more important of those wickets. He's caught down at long leg, and they're 8 down. And then he finishes it off, Agarkar, by Jason Gillespie caught behind, steering one into the gloves of the wicketkeeper, and then McGillah trying to put him on the moon and losing his off stump. All told, Australia out for 196 late on day 4. Agarkar 6 for 41 from 16.2 overs. India set a chase of 230 on the final day, and they do it 6 wickets down proudly, with Rahul Dravid adding an unbeaten 72. And who's there at the end? It's Ajit Agarkar, not out appropriately on 0.
That was the not out that I mentioned before from that Australian series, where he didn't make a lot of runs in that series. I think he faced 2 balls in that not out, and Rahul Dravid's heart must have been in his mouth for every second that he was waiting for Agarkar to face a delivery. 6 down could have become 7 down very quickly indeed. What a time, what a test match, and what a beautiful link that Angadh Oberoi's 530 has come in just before James Rodder's 6 for 41. And they have been the story of Ajit Agarkar. What a tale it has been. Clayton Lewis is our next cab off the rank. $3.87 is his number. And I've gone for something from memory, Adam. So I'm not... It's one of these things where I'm not I'm 99.9% sure this is right, but I didn't want to try to work it out in case I was wrong. So I was like, look, I'm just going to trust my recollection here because I think that 38.7 was Michael Klinger's first-class batting average in November 2015. Now, why is this important? You may ask. Why is that significant?
I remember. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah. I'll bet you would remember, if anyone. At this point of time, there'd been an exodus from the Australian Test team. Chris Rogers, Michael Clarke, great game of cricket, Shane Robert Watson, all chucked it in England. There's a lot of talk in that November about who should be picked in the Test team. And Uncle Rod Marsh was part-time chairman of selectors, full-time chairman of Shiraz, who was running proceedings at the time and used to come up with some pretty idiosyncratic answers in press conferences about why he'd picked certain players. When he was asked about Michael Klinger, Uncle Rod said this. He said, "Of course we've looked at Michael Klinger. He's got to keep making runs." Now, I'll point out that at this stage, in the previous 2.5 years, across all formats, Michael Klinger had made 25 centuries, 38 50s, among his 8,302 runs in professional cricket in the space of 2.5 years. He's got to keep making runs, said Uncle Rod. How? Where? Like, he's played all of the matches he's eligible to play in Australia and in England. He would have to be parachuting into park cricket games and just taking them over. Uncle Rod's other comment was about Joe Burns and Usman Khawaja, who were also in contention for spots at the top of the order. And Rod said, "Have you looked at Michael Klinger's batting average in first-class cricket? It's not as good as the other boys." So 2 notes that I made at the time in writing about this was that someone's batting average includes all of their innings, which means you're counting the innings that Michael Klinger had when he was 18 as opposed to the ones that he had when he was 35, at which time he was rather a better player. In any cases, the averages in question were Klinger, 38.7, Khawaja, 39.6, Burns 40.4. So everybody was within a run and a half of each other, but apparently that was supposed to be enough of a breaking point. Now, this was all funny enough to begin with, but the day after Rod Marsh's press conference, there was a Shield match against the Vicks in which Michael Klinger made 202 not out in the first innings and 50 not out in the second innings, at which point his first-class average went to 39.9, going past Usman Khawaja, who'd had 2 failures in his first Shield match. So Michael Klinger now had a higher average than Usman Khawaja. Did he get picked in the Test team because of it? He did not. Khawaja did. He made 2 tons in those first 2 tests, and so he was probably the right pick. But then he did his hamstring at the Wacker in the second test. They needed a replacement. There was a spot in the 11. So who got the call? Sean Marsh. Of course he did. Sean Marsh. 387 Michael Klinger for Clayton Lewis.
Very nice. The law firm delivers again. I think that with that, some of them, it was amongst the most painful answers that he gave Marsh towards the end of his tenure. Another being that Jackson Bird wasn't picked for the Hobart Test because he didn't make enough runs at number 11 compared to, I think it was Joe Mennie he was being compared. Well, it doesn't really matter who he was being compared to. It was the fact that he couldn't sort of see past that. And yeah, this was the classic kind of, I think this was when just as data was taking over in terms of like how squads were being picked compared to gut feel. And, you know, the idea that Michael Klinger's innings, he was even younger than that. I'm pretty sure he made his first class debut at 16 back in 1998-99, I want to say. That was still being held as a marker in the summer of 15-16 was utterly absurd, but such is the era that it was that they didn't see fit to give him an opportunity. I'm glad that he did get one at T20 level eventually. It would have been a travesty if Klinger never played international cricket at all, but you're right, that was the moment to give him an opportunity. And the fact that, I mean, and the thing I think we said at the time, it wasn't that Khawaja or Burns were the wrong players to pick. It was just that you get a bit of a, you know, when you go under the hood at the decision-making process, you see how flawed it is, and that left Klinger having to sort of shrug his shoulders at that suggestion that, well, if your first-class average isn't higher than the other 2 guys, you're out of the team. You know, the classic case of picking teams based on spreadsheets rather than sort of having any nous about it and any other input.
It was never the reason why the decision was made. It was always that there was some post hoc rationale given to, like, we're going to pick this player because we want to pick this player, and then we'll make up something afterwards, whatever fits, you know, whatever sounds plausible. And that has been the issue with Australian selection justifications for a long time.
All right, good stuff, Jeff. 387 Clayton Lewis. So good, Jeff, that I have pulled it out of the hat. We have our winner of the Brick Lane Brewing Community slab of beer, which Clayton can give to whoever he sees fit.
The law firm can send it to a client, send it to a client list, or enjoy some Friday work drinks with the partners, the juniors, whatever. I don't know what happens at a law firm. I've never been. If I've ever talked to a lawyer, I run away from them. Yes, Clayton, you can give someone a slab. You can give yourself a slab. You can give someone else a slab. Today I'm reading a page about the Brick Lane draft because, it's straightforward, straight to the point, the draft. Here's what they have to say. They say that the aroma reminds you of everything to love about honest beer. Light esters shine from our hard-working yeast, some clean, grainy maltiness, and body from the use of all real Victorian malt and no sugar. Yeah, just imagine you or me just pointing to ourselves and saying, all Victorian malt, baby, no sugar.
Well, this is part of it, isn't it? The fact that they do, where they can, overwhelmingly use Australian materials and work with a lot of Victorian suppliers, great for jobs locally. They're very environmentally aware in terms of their processes internally. I just think that all of this contributes to why they're such a good partner for us, Jeff, and why I love having them part of our little finer word world. If you want to associate yourself with Brick Lane, follow them on social media. Maybe if you're down at the bottle shop buying yourself a beer and you're not as fortunate as Clayton Lewis to have won the slab this week, maybe pick up yourself a six-pack and pour yourself a glass and send a photo to them on social media and let them know that we sent you. That would be nice, and we can share the love around because there's plenty of that between us and Brick Lane at the moment.
Indeed. And if you want to win a slab, sign up with a Nerd Pledge. You can help us make the show and you can get yourself a case that you could send to someone in Australia or keep for yourself. Patreon.com/thefinalword.
All right, our final new number this week is from Steve Dodd. He sent through 441. That's sent through in pounds. Speaking of Joe Burns, he is cap 441 for Australia in Test cricket.
Oh, good.
He had that cap before that summer, though, didn't he? He won his cap in the Melbourne Test of 2014, batting at 6, and then
he played 2 tests at 6 in Melbourne and Sydney against India and made a 50, I think, and then came up to open in November.
Didn't make the Ashes squad, did he? So he played the 2 tests to win 14-15, but they went with a slightly more experienced squad to the Caribbean and then to England, and then of course he was back in fashion when they got beaten comprehensively. Well, they didn't get beaten comprehensively in England. They were too old, but it felt like they were beaten comprehensively just due to the savagery of the losses at Edgbaston and Nottingham, and so they moved back to Burns. But
2-3, not 2-all.
2-3 was it? Was it 3-2? Oh yeah, of course they were. That's right. You're right. They did lose 3-2. They lost to Cardiff, didn't they? Right. So not Joe Burns. It's a score that's never been made in first class cricket. 440.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah, 443 was though. It's an innings that I didn't really know about by a batsman I'd never really heard of. A guy by the name of Basaheb Nimbalkar in 1948 at Pune. But yes, that's not 441, so we'll put a line through him. If we want to stick to an earlier theme, though, and again, this is purely coincidental, I solved this, well, I looked at this answer before I looked at the Agarkar answer for the record. 441 is what Australia made against India at Adelaide in 1999, the Damien Fleming not hat-trick match. So that's at one stage they were 52 for 4 when Steve Waugh joined Ricky Ponting, and they made 150 and 125 respectively. Then Shane Warne bashed 86. That was the day Warne had the best chance of making a Test 100, by the way. That was the best he ever batted, I reckon, in Test cricket, really capitalising after the huge stand between Waugh and Ponting. Looking at batting averages, though, I thought that would be the more likely measure, Jeff. 44.1, that sort of feels more batting averagey, batting averaging-y than it does team score or individual score. And what do you know? 44.1, bang on the money of one of my favourite players ever and one of my favourite people in the game, Charlotte Edwards, Queen Lottie. She's the only player in men's or women's Test cricket to have an average that lands exactly on 44.1. And from a proper sort of sample size as well, Jeff, she played 23 Test matches between 1996 and 2015 before retiring from international cricket a year later in 2016. I went through it now, and look, the most amount of Test crickets played played by anyone who is active is Catherine Brunt with 13, so 10 fewer than Lottie, and Migdali Raj 11, Elise Perry 8, Heather Knight 8, Anya Shrubsole 7. In all probability, there'll never be a woman who'll play 23 Test matches ever again, which is an indictment, but such are the times that the women cricketers are living in at the moment, with a strong priority for white ball cricket, which I've got no issue with that, but I do think they should get the chance to play Tests more often for reasons that we've argued for years on this podcast. Anyway, I digress. So Lottie was captain for a decade after Claire Connor, which was something that we talked to Claire about last week, taking over in 2006. But yeah, she made her debut back in 96, and she was so prolific. Her first of the 4 Test tons that she made was in 1999 against the Australians at Shenley. The second was 1-1-1 in 2004 against New Zealand at Scarborough, and that was a bit of a statement, that series, as we went through with Claire to an extent. In 2004, they had the 05 Ashes on the horizon, and they were trying to lay the foundation for that. And this is when Edwards took over really as England's best player. She was the vice captain, but she was the most important player as well. Then the third of her Test centuries was at Taunton in 2006 against India, and in many respects she saved the best to last, Jeff. 114 not out against the Australians at Bankstown in 2011, a Test match that we've talked about before with Isha Guha on the Final Word a couple of years ago. Lottie made 114 not out of all out 207. I did put it in the calculator to check if it was a Bannerman. Not quite, but it was 56%. Coming in at number 4. The next highest score was Jenny Gunn making 33 at number 5, and then Holly Colvin was third highest scorer with 15. Nobody else made it to double figures. But yeah, Lottie batted for 310 deliveries, just 7 boundaries. Like, she really grinded it out against Perry and Farrell and Coit and Stalaker and Nitschke. It was a great low-scoring Test match there at Bankstown, where Australia finally won, chasing 198 in the 4th innings. And it was the last of the one-off Test matches to decide the Women's Ashes. They moved to the multi-format point system by 2013. For Lottie's part, she was made a CBE in 2014. She should have been made a Dame when Alistair Cook was made a Knight a couple of years ago. That was a fuck-up. Hopefully they rectify that at some point in the future. Her last Test match was in 2015, a Test that we were both at, Jeff, at Canterbury, where Australia won. So it was a losing effort for her, but overall she is the best all-format player that England has ever produced. And Jeff, the plan, and I flagged this with her a couple of weeks ago when we were working on Sky Cricket together, is that we will do the big Final Word treatment with Lot at some point soon. When our diaries align, we will do the long-form Charlotte Edwards story, because it's an absolute belter. Fantastic human being, brilliant cricketer. Charlotte Edwards, average 441. Steve Dodd, what do you say?
And I can tell you, Adam, I can add to that, not only the only Test player to average 44.1, but nobody's averaged 44.1 in any format.
Really?
Across international cricket.
It's kind of funny, because that instinct, that instinct that I had was wrong in a way then, wasn't it? I kind of thought batting average, but
it's in that range.
In that range, yeah.
Yeah. But, just as a curiosity, I noticed while looking up something else, there are no other 44.1s. That's it. The only one. I like it. Charlotte Edwards, Steve Dodd. Let us know. Drop us a DM. Well, that is the end of our section of new numbers for this week. You can send us one on Patreon anytime you want to get on the list. Let's take a breather, and then we'll get to the revisits, the numbers we may not have got quite right in the weeks before.
Hi, I'm Ebony Rainford Brent, and you're listening to The Final Word with Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon.
Jeff, over the last few months, we've used this spot to talk about some of the ways in which you can support Lord's Taverners and the wonderful work they do in the community for some of the most vulnerable members of the community. Been doing that for 7 decades now, and they're such a fantastic partner of cricket and sport more broadly. I thought that given we've piled on quite a lot of new listeners in the last few months, that it might be worth stepping back a little bit and reminding people of the story. And given Nerd Pledge and Storytime is all about numbers, we've been handed quite a useful list of numbers here, which just kind of puts things in perspective, and I thought we'd run through those.
Yeah, what Lord's Taverners are all about is using sport particularly as a way to bring people together and to offer companionship and community to people who particularly need it. What they've been telling us over the last year and a half, especially during the pandemic, is that people who live with a disability are much more likely to report feelings of loneliness and isolation. They're less likely to have sufficient community support around them. And so the kind of sport programs that the Lord's Tavs are able to put on for people who do live with disability are particularly important as a way to offer social opportunity and community opportunity. So they've had, in 2020, over 12,000 participants taking part in their programs across the UK. They delivered well over 3,000 coaching sessions across all of their cricket programs, where they have different adapted versions of cricket so that people with different kinds of disability can play those different formats of cricket. 89% of the participants said that being part of the Lord's Tabs programs made them feel better about themselves, and 89% of the participants said that they were more active due to the Lord's Tabs programs.
All right, my turn for some numbers, Jeff. 81% of participants said that being part of Lord's Tabs programs made them feel more optimistic about the future. 95% of participants said that being part of the programs made them feel more included. And 90% said they were able to make new friends because of the programs that Lord's Tabs have been putting on.
So that's the kind of effect that Lord's Taverners have been able to have. If you would like to help them continue to do the work that they do, you can head to lordstaverners.org, check out the programs that they put on, see how you might like to contribute, whether that's by donation or by getting involved. There are plenty of good things that they do, events they put on, and outdoor activities that people are able to get involved with as a way of trying to raise funds or being part of things.
Yeah, they actually had a lunch this week at the Oval, which Daniel Norcross went along to. I think it was a Surrey Lord's Tabs function. But yeah, that's quite exciting too, that we've reached the stage of the pandemic where we can start having big Lord's Tabs functions again. So that might be up your alley, or maybe something like what Declan Lawler did, an outside challenge. There's a number of ways to do it. If you just want to make a monthly contribution, that's easy as well. It's all there on the website at lordstaverners.org.
I'm Glenn Maxwell. Make sure you listen to my favourite podcast, The Final Word.
This is The Final Word with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins, the part of the show where we look at previous numbers, the revisits, the confirmations. First up is Rory Dennis, who was on the show recently with $9 even, 900.
Yeah, so, you're right. It was not long ago where we said instead of 900, we went to number 9, so Cap 9, Tom Kendall, which was quite fun. Rory said in reply, unfortunately, you two went for the wrong player. Correct match, but wrong player. Love your work as always.
Okay, so Rory, this means it was from the first Test match in 1877, the match that was posthumously declared to be the first match of Test cricket, in that 11 players from England took on 11 players from Australia. So I was looking for nines related to that match. Tom Armitage and Tom Emmett each made a score of 9 for England in that match. Dave Gregory, who was captaining Australia, and Tom Garrett each conceded 9 runs in the fourth innings, and John Hodges bowled 9 overs in the first innings, 1 for 27. But I don't think it's any of those. I think where it ended up was with Bransby Cooper. Bransby Cooper made 3 and 15 in the match, meaning he made 18 in the Test match and averaged 9 in Test cricket, 9.00, because he was out both times. He and Ned Gregory were the two across both teams who played that first Test match and never played another Test. They were one Test wonders in the very first Test match of all. They both played for Australia. All of the England players played at least 2. Bransby Beauchamp Cooper. Beauchamp, what a name. It means beautiful champ in Australian, which is a nice thing to be able to call somebody. Bransby, you'll never guess, was a posh lad. Adam, you'll be surprised about that. Was an Englishman originally. His father was with the East India Company. He played county cricket for Kent and Middlesex. And then he moved to Australia in 1869. So by 1877, he was ready to play Test cricket for Australia. He was the quintessential amateur gentleman of his day, gave the ball a whack, did a bit of wicket keeping, played 50 first-class matches and made 1 century and averaged 20.5 and still called himself a batsman. I suppose that was probably a decent average at the time, 20.5. Became fairly prominent in Victorian state cricket when he got to Melbourne. So he made that Test team. And as it happens, day 1 of the first Test match was his birthday. On his birthday! So he becomes the answer to trivia questions as well, because he was born in India. So he is technically the first Indian-born Test cricketer, Bransby Cooper, in Test match number 1.
Very good. Nice to get a lovely additional part to the answer from last week. So thank you, Rory, for that opportunity. Second up, Glenn Finkeld came back to us on 302. Where we started was Wilfred Road's batting average, 30.2, but not quite.
Yeah, or 30.19 maybe it was, thereabouts. Glenn said, I didn't give this pledge too much thought. I instead went with possibly the first game I can remember attending. Let's just say that the stars of this match were a bloke who may or may not have started off as a leg spinner and another guy who added his own chapter to the Arthurian legend.
I think he's hinting at SPD Smith here, but not quite the same Steve Smith.
SB Smith, maybe?
Yeah,
Stephen Barry Smith?
Yeah, so the other Steve Smith, well, I know Glenn's age roughly. He's 40-something, owing to the fact that I remember him playing in the North Dandenong Ones as a kid. And obviously he's a cricket nut. So he would have been going to the cricket ground, when he's pretty young, very, very young. So 83, first game of cricket for him, that feels about right. And that's where we're going to take it, to the Benson and Hedges Cup at the MCG in 1983, where Australia made, wait for it, 302. Huge score in 1983. Huge score. David Hooks made 40. Graham Wood made 91, but the star of the show was Stephen Barry Smith, who made 117 from 130 balls. And if you thought that was fast, New Zealand got bowled out for 153, but there was a dramatic flourish at the end, coming at number 8. A man hit 6 sixes and finished with 52 runs from 25 balls, and he was caught by Steve Smith, and that was Lance Cairns, King Arthur. See what I'm saying here? The Arthurian legend at the end, King Arthur, Lance. So, yes, obviously, the sad postscript to this is that since we recorded this clue the first time around, that Lance Cairns' son, Chris Cairns, is in critical condition currently in the ICU in Canberra Hospital after a catastrophic heart attack. So all our well wishes from the cricket community more generally to Chris Cairns, who was such an influential player as we were both growing up, Jeff.
Destructive in that same kind of way, the way that Lance Cairns set the template for, and they were both pretty useful at whacking them over the fence. So all of our best wishes to everybody involved there. So that will be the 302. Glenn Finkeld's $3.02 will be the 302 that Australia made with Steve Smith, with Lance Cairns, the Arthurian legend. It all comes together. Thanks, Glenn. He promises that his next number is going to be way more complex. Okay, well, thanks for warning us. We've got a revisit too from Darcy Matthews, who had the 180 that we were looking at, the $1.80 that we thought was an innings of 180 at some point.
Yes, I actually can't remember who the innings was that we looked at initially, but what I do know is
I
think we went through a number of them, didn't we? So the first clue that Darcy sent through was that it involved supremely clean batting, and it was a player that Darcy thought might be a touch unlucky. That's right, we went through a couple of unlucky cricketers. He goes on to say, in retrospect, that was a stupid clue, as the player in question later got incredibly lucky in the greatest game of all.
Well, the greatest game of all. So this means one of two things. One, Darcy's cricketer actually played rugby league, the greatest game of all. Or two, Darcy's cricketer played in the 2019 World Cup final, which I'm pretty confident in guessing that's the game that you'd be referring to. Now, curious little fact here. This was something I was looking at last time I looked at the 180. In terms of one-day international cricket, only 2 players have ever made scores of 180 individually. Both of them played in that game, Martin Guptill and Jason Roy. Both made 180 at different times in one-day cricket.
Yep.
Jason Roy is the only one who got lucky in that match, so we're going to be leading towards him. He made that 180 at the MCG in that quite notable series in January 2018 when England came over and their one-day team arrived, after the Ashes and absolutely smashed up Australia, beat them 4-1, and it started in that first game when Australia had set 300 plus and Jason Roy made 180 and chased it down in an absolute stroll. So he's the one who got a bit lucky during the 2019 World Cup final. Martin Guptill didn't. He got his 180 against South Africa in Hamilton and hit 11 sixes, but he is the pin-up for unluckiness in the 2019 World Cup final. He's the player who burns New Zealand's review when he tries to get his LBW overturned and it doesn't work, and later Ross Taylor gets given out when he shouldn't have been out and can't overturn it. Guptill's the one who parries that Ben Stokes sweep shot into the boundary rope when he's diving trying to save it late in the game. Yes. Guptill's the one who's standing right next to Trent Boult, watching him about to step backwards onto the rope and knowing that it's about to happen and not being able to do anything to stop it. And Guptill's the one who throws in the ball at the stumps that deflects off Stokes' bat and goes for the 4 overthrows that turns 2 into 6. Guptill's the one who's on strike for the final ball of the super over, where he only needs 2 runs to win it and he can only get 1. And Archer bowls it right at his heel. And I haven't seen anyone really pick up on this, but basically, if Guptill hadn't shuffled a little bit to the leg side, that would have been a wide. It's on the heel of his boot because he steps marginally to the leg side as it's coming down. If he'd stood where he was, that would have been a wide.
Whilst that's true, I think that Archer, not so much that he saw him coming, but he was able to premeditate that Guptill was going. It would have taken Guptill to have taken a pretty bold ploy to have jumped the other way because the leg side, there was 3 on the leg side, 2 on the offside. So it would have required, it would have been a very bold move had Guptill went offside for that delivery. It would have probably played in favour of Archer.
I'm just saying that when you're talking about being a bit unlucky, he's a centimetre off being bowled a wide then, and then he'd only need 1 to win. And who knows, maybe Archer would have got him out and it would have been an even more crazy dramatic end and England still would have won on the count back, but who knows. So if someone was not lucky in the 2019 World Cup final, it was Martin Guptill. That's where I'm going with this. Thus, Jason Roy's 180 is Darcy Matthews' 180.
Very good. And of course, if not for Guptill's direct throw running out Dhoni, they probably wouldn't have been in the World Cup final to begin with. So, yeah, I do feel a bit sorry for Guptill on a number of levels. One of the good guys in cricket. Thank you, Darcy Matthews, for letting us follow that up. Thank you as well to Evan Granger. Now, Evan Granger sent through 401, which gave us a second swing at Ginger Lee. It was his first-class wicket tally. And the other clue was it was about bad timing. And we looked at his bad timing only being able to play a limited amount of Test cricket. Evan added that my pledge doesn't even qualify as a DOB, as this player did their best work in the 1980s. Also, as an Aussie, I'd argue that if you expanded the DOB scope, my man would very much qualify. In other words, perhaps a less dustier and older DOB. Right, so, look, I ended up thinking that based on the qualifications we had in the past, that a sort of modern DOB, you would qualify with 2 Test matches and 4 one-dayers, wouldn't you? Like, that's not too much international cricket, especially
that's dusty.
Yeah, that's dusty. Yeah. But acknowledging that it's going to be a player in the 80s, so it's not going to be dusty as we would like. But if that's what you were doing, and also obviously it's going to involve a decimal place due to the rounding up, rounding down, and he's told us not to round up, which. Okay. To me, if you've got a number that's above 0.5, you would naturally round up. So I therefore think that it's a number probably above the 0.5, but asking us to round down anyway, something like that. Anyway,
above the 0.05 maybe.
Yeah, 0.05. That's right, not 0.5. So on that basis. How's this sound?
Don't get confused with those with breathalyzers. That's a bad time.
Yes.
If you think you can have 0.5 instead of 0.05, you're in for a rude shock.
Yeah, absolutely are. Okay, let's try this on for size. First class batting average of 40.17. So, yes, sure, that's a first class batting average of 40.2, as we know, by convention. But you could also, if you didn't round up and you round it down, make it 40.1, is Roger Woolley. Roger Woolley, a great Tasmanian, middle order batsman, sometimes wicketkeeper, made his debut in the first Shield season, in their first Shield season rather, in 1977-78. Made their first Shield ton later that season. Made 99 not out the year after that when Tasmania won a match in the Sheffield Shield for the first time. And he was in the team for their first piece of silverware, the Gillette Cup, in that season, 1978-79. He was the first Tasmanian picked for Australia who'd actually played for Tassie. So I guess, Max Walker and others, but in terms of those who had played for Tassie, that was Roger Woolley. He played the one-off test against Sri Lanka in Kandy, where Dean Jones made 100, and another when he was the understudy in the tour of the West Indies in 1984, which we often refer to affectionately as the Jim Maxwell Tour. He captained Tasmania in first-class cricket 28 times. He retired in 1988 and still lives down there on the Apple Isle. Roger Woolley. I reckon that's probably where Evan Granger was for 401. And if we're wrong and we've misunderstood that, that's fine. Just give us a pretty strong steer and we'll try and finish it off next week.
No, I think that works because he's saying don't round up, as in don't round, just take the first 3 digits, 401, therefore it's 40.1, and don't worry about the second digit. So Roger Woolley makes sense. dusty enough, modern DOB, if you will, and move to Tasmania like Tom Kendall, who we spoke about last week, who played in the first Test match, took 7 for in the fourth innings and then said, bugger it, I'm going to chuck it in and be a typesetter for the Mercury in Hobart. So some good work done by Tassie. Our final revisit, $8.80 from Michael Edelstein. I was looking at Sir Garfield Sober's 8 for 80 in the match in a test in 1965. Michael said, all I'll say is there's a link to this number from my last pledge. In addition, they are a current player who will be next playing tomorrow. And then a few hours later, he emailed back and said, sorry, this player is playing today, not tomorrow, but there's a good reason I was confused. Okay, so this took some detective work. The day of these clues was August the 1st. Where were you on the night of August the 1st? The only matches that were on that day in England were 100 matches. Michael's last pledge involved a spinner called Pat Pocock, who was Welsh and who played for Surrey, but neither the Welsh Fire nor the Oval Invincibles were playing in the 100 on the 1st of August. So it could not be a player playing for any of those teams. August the 1st, there was someone playing named C. Jordan, not Jordan C. C. Jordan is Chris Jordan, who currently plays in the 100 with the Southern Brave, but has also been a player for Surrey. Thus, the Surrey team wasn't playing, but a player who has been a Surrey player and may still be a Surrey player, I always find it hard to keep track of who moves around where, was playing on the 1st of August and is the only Surrey-related player that I can find who was playing in the 100 on the 1st of August. How do you link Chris Jordan to 880, which was Michael's number? He was born in 1988, so there's an 88 link there. But aside from that, when batting in one-day international cricket, which he doesn't get much opportunity to do these days, he has a batting strike rate of 88.0, which is the number that Michael Edelstein sent through.
I don't remember what Michael's first clue was, but it takes quite a few leaps to get to Chris Jordan's one-day batting strike rate. So I'm glad there was a bit of a steer there, because we could have been guessing for a very, very long time in the absence of that clue. But I suppose that's what it's all about. Thank you, Michael, for being part of the fun. That's the end of our revisits, Jeff. We've done well there, getting through quite a few. As Jeff said off the top, if you want to be part of what we're doing, patreon.com/the final word. Before we take our leave today, we have a couple of confirmations of clues that we got right on previous episodes. And the first of those is from Steve Stevens and his 188, which took Jeff going through about 12 numbers, multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, all to get to Shane Watson. Steve says here, I loved hearing you untangle my nerd pledge, and I appreciate the effort that went into it. I doubly loved hearing that a spreadsheet was used, as I used a spreadsheet to create it. Apologies for potentially setting a precedent for elongated clues, but I wanted to create something as complicated as I felt Shane was, both as a person and as a cricketer. Well, I really do enjoy the sentiment of that, Steve. Also, yes, we're not encouraging people to send through clues like that on the reg, otherwise we wouldn't have time to do anything else in our lives other than solve pledges. However, that was a nice little fun one-off, and Jeff did it justice, I think.
Well, I'm prepared to go through that sort of effort to get to Shane Watson, Steve. Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from you, SRW. We also got Danish Babar's number right, the 130 that ended up being the score that Ireland made during their first test in Malahide. Danish says, yes, the 130 was that first Irish men's test innings. I made the journey to Malahide to watch the match, and what a fantastic decision that was. Hopefully it won't be long before we can return to the Emerald Isle for another test match. Adam will be on the bus with you first aboard if that takes place, Dinesh.
Too right. The next time that Ireland play a test match at home, I will do everything in my power to be there for all 5 days. Indeed, a couple of days before as well, to get the full sort of build up and all the rest. Hopefully that's possible.
And a couple of days after to recover.
Maybe a couple of days after to recover. That's exactly right. No, I think that's possible next summer. I think that there's certainly momentum for Ireland to play a test match at home again next summer when everything calms down a little bit. So maybe we can make a final word trip of it, and we'll get some people to come along and do a show out there, and it'll be a bit of fun, I reckon.
If we could, we can get the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, maybe a cheeky one-day series in the Netherlands, between Amsterdam and Rotterdam, and then pop over to Ireland for a test match.
Here we go. Now we're talking.
We're gonna have ourselves a good couple of weeks.
Hell yeah, looking forward to it. That's it, isn't it, Jeff? That's the show for today.
That's it. We have done our dash on story time. Thanks once again, everybody, for listening in, and the huge community effort that it is to actually make this show. There wouldn't be a show without people thinking about it, thinking about great stories, sending us numbers, sending us clues, answering our correspondence, helping steer us in the right direction, and above all, putting the fuel in the car that helps us make this show and put the time into it that we need to put into it. It's so much fun. We love doing it. We love chatting with people about it on the Discord and all the rest. So, yeah, if you haven't been involved, come on down, get involved. It's a hell of a lot of fun. Thanks to Dave Collins, who edits this show. It's on the Bad Producer Podcast Network. Thanks to Brick Lane for sponsoring The Final Word, as well as the Lord's Taverners. You can find information about both of them in the show notes, as well as anything else you need to know. We will be back mid-week, Wednesday next week, with the Final Word Weekly Show, and in between now and then we'll have the daily shows from the India-England Test match, and hoping the rain stays away. Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins, we'll see you next time.
Have a nice weekend.
I had to go